They did not ask for his name. They did not need to. The morning air carried the scent of burned oil and something sour, maybe from the food trucks lined along the curb. A bus hissed to a stop across the street, its hydraulic breath masking the slap of flesh on flesh. Zayden Cole's head snapped sideways from the blow. His glasses clattered to the pavement, sliding beneath the rusting fender of a parked cruiser. "You do not belong here," the officer muttered, low and certain, as if pronouncing fact rather than threat. His badge read C. Murphy, though the name did not match the way he handled Zayden's body, more like property than person. Zayden did not resist. His arms remained loose, empty hands raised just slightly, like he had rehearsed this moment his entire life. The sidewalk was already watching. Two bailiffs looked up from their cigarettes. A county clerk paused mid-step, holding her latte like it might explain what was happening. He wore no robe, no tie, no briefcase, just navy slacks, a faded maroon jacket, and a calm too fragile for this city. To them, he was no one. To them, he was black. Officer Murphy shoved him against the stone perimeter of the courthouse. The granite was still cool from the night. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Zayden inhaled once through his nose. The cuffs closed with a click that echoed louder than it should have. A passing intern whispered something to her colleague. They both laughed. Murphy snatched the leather portfolio from the ground, flipping it open with a scoff. Inside were legal memos, a signed court docket, and a laminated parking pass bearing the county seal. He closed it without reading a word. "You're not supposed to be here," he repeated. Zayden's mouth stayed closed. He had already learned. Silence was safer than the truth, and truth too often got filtered through fear. Inside, the fluorescent lights turned his bruised cheek a shade paler. The processing desk was quiet except for the low hum of a malfunctioning fan. A younger officer stood nearby, arms folded. She watched him the way you might study a man on a ledge, not quite close enough to save, not far enough to pretend you did not see. "Name?" Zayden said nothing. Murphy filled the silence. "Claims he's a contractor or some kind of paralegal. Tried to bring forged documents into a secured zone. No ID." The younger officer leaned forward. "He say anything?" "He said plenty. None of it helpful." They laughed. Zayden's eyes drifted upward. A ceiling tile was stained the color of rust. Someone had scratched initials into the edge. The initials were CAW. He stared at them longer than necessary. His wrists stung. The skin had been pinched under the metal, blood pooling just beneath the surface. Time passed, or maybe it folded. Eventually, someone came to process him. A court liaison, young, sharp suit, receding hairline. He frowned at the intake form, then at Zayden. "You're the guy from this morning?" Zayden blinked. "Depends who you think I am." The liaison looked confused. "They said you were impersonating court staff. That true?" Zayden's voice came low like an old piano chord. "No." "You have ID?" Zayden nodded toward the portfolio. "Front sleeve, under the case summary." The liaison opened it. He paused, blinked, pulled out a laminated ID and stared. Then he read it again. "Wait. Senior judicial architect?" "Yes." "You're Cole?" "Yes." The man stepped back. "You're the guy redesigning Courtroom D?" "Yes." The silence returned, heavier now. The room felt smaller. A distant intercom buzzed. Someone yelled in the hallway. A paper tray jammed itself 3 desks over. The liaison turned to Murphy. "You cuffed a district court staffer?" Murphy's face flickered, just for a second. He refused to identify himself. "No, I didn't," Zayden said finally. "You never asked." Murphy looked at him, but this time it was not contempt in his eyes. It was fear. Small, tight, and coiled at the edge of recognition. The liaison swallowed. "We need to fix this." Zayden didn't answer. His hands remained bound, the steel tight against his bones. Eventually, someone brought the keys. Eventually, someone offered him coffee. Eventually, someone said sorry, but not Murphy. He slipped out through the side door, like smoke leaving a fire that had not finished burning. Zayden stood in front of the courthouse elevator, rubbing the marks on his wrists. The lobby felt too clean, too quiet. A security guard opened the chamber doors without a word. Zayden stepped inside. He adjusted his collar in the mirrored wall, hiding the bruise blooming just under his jawline. As the elevator rose, he exhaled through his teeth. He did not plan to forget, and he sure as hell did not plan to forgive. The elevator dinged on the 3rd floor. He stepped out into the corridor, into a day that would change more than just one name in a report. The hallway outside Courtroom D smelled faintly of varnish and sweat, fresh wood, old nerves. Zayden's footsteps echoed down the corridor, steady and slow. The doors to the courtroom were still open. A clerk sat inside, flipping through case files, one manicured nail tapping the desk in a rhythm she did not seem to notice. She looked up. Her expression shifted, curiosity, then discomfort, then something cautious like recognition, but not quite. "You're early," she said. Zayden stepped into the room. "I never left." She furrowed her brow. "You need something?" "My badge, my seat." "My role." He let the words settle. "I'm here to finish what I started." The courtroom was still empty of litigants. The bench loomed quiet and untouched. His gaze drifted to the ceiling paneling. He had designed that arch, the acoustics, even the placement of the hidden cameras above the gallery. The irony curled under his skin like heat. They had tried to erase him from a space he built. "I have a meeting with Judge Merrick in 15 minutes, he added, "about the redesign plans." The clerk stood, uncertain now. "They said you weren't coming." Zayden raised an eyebrow. "They said you'd been detained." He didn't blink. "I was." The doors behind him opened. A voice followed like a knife through paper. "There he is." Merrick's presence was always announced by voice first, measured, full of theater. His robe wasn't on yet, but the dress shirt and cuffs were pristine. He looked like a man who had not yet had his morning shaken. That would change. "Zayden," Merrick said, approaching, extending a hand. "We were worried." Zayden didn't take it. His hands remained at his sides. "Something happened this morning?" Merrick asked, a little too casually. "I was arrested on your courthouse steps." Silence swept through the room. "For impersonating a court official," Zayden continued. Merrick's jaw moved, but nothing came out. "I showed up at 7:40 a.m., exactly as scheduled, carrying today's structural reports. I was stopped, searched, struck, cuffed. They called me a threat, a fraud, said I didn't belong here." Merrick's voice lowered. "You're saying our deputies—" "I'm saying your officers," Zayden interrupted, "saw a black man with court papers and assumed criminality. I'm saying that in your courthouse, the one I helped design, my face registered as a security breach." The clerk slowly sat down. Her fingers tightened around the pen in her hand. No one in the room moved. Merrick took a breath, and for the first time, it didn't sound confident. "Zayden, if there's anything I can do—" "There is." Zayden pulled a folder from under his arm and laid it flat on the bench. "This is the redesign proposal for the West Wing renovation, including security enhancements, hallway surveillance nodes, and blind spot elimination outside the south lobby. I was coming to present it this morning." He tapped the folder once, gently. "I suggest you review it carefully, because in 5 minutes, I'm taking this to internal oversight." "Wait!" Merrick stepped forward, voice rising. Zayden didn't stop. And if you don't intervene directly, those security tapes are going public. Merrick's face went still. You're not just a judge, Peter. You're a landlord. These steps, this building, are your responsibility. Merrick hesitated. Let me handle it quietly. No, Zayden said. Quiet is how this keeps happening. He turned and left before Merrick could speak again. The clerk stood halfway, but Zayden didn't meet her eyes. Downstairs, the atmosphere had changed. Word had traveled fast, as it always did in government buildings, faster than policy, faster than justice. 3 officers stood near the front desk. One of them looked away the moment he saw Zayden. Another tightened his jaw. The third said nothing at all. Zayden kept walking. His bruised cheek had darkened since sunrise, and now it was beginning to swell. He could feel each heartbeat blooming behind the skin, but it grounded him. A reminder. At the security station, Officer Murphy was no longer present. Instead, a young Latina guard, mid-20s, shoulders squared with quiet alertness, watched him approach. She didn't speak. Zayden paused. You knew? Transferred last month. Sergeant Ramos. She didn't offer her hand, just met his eyes, steady and professional. I heard about this morning, she said. Zayden studied her. Then you understand why I'm not handing over my badge again. She nodded once. You won't need to. He passed through the checkpoint without resistance. No questions, no pat down, just space. Outside, the sun had climbed above the Civic Center, throwing harsh shadows across the marble steps. He stopped halfway down, turned, and looked up at the courthouse facade. The columns stood tall, defiant. The same ones he had drawn a decade ago on tracing paper at a firm that refused to put his name on blueprints. He had built this place, and still he had been erased from its entrance. Not anymore. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar, and deleted the blocked hour for private design session. Then he typed in a new event. District Testimony Request, Oversight Board. It started in 25 minutes. He slid the phone back into his pocket and kept walking, leaving behind a building that now knew who he was. The Oversight Board met on the 8th floor of a building no one ever bothered to notice. No gold plaques, no armed guards, just a frosted glass door marked Office of Integrity and Risk in cheap vinyl lettering that peeled at the edges. Zayden stood outside for a moment, letting his reflection catch up to him in the glass. The bruise on his face had settled into a deeper purple now. His lip was cracked where the pressure of the cuffs had thrown him forward against the granite wall. The pain pulsed steady, rhythmic, and real. A record of the morning no one could erase. Inside, the boardroom buzzed with a low voltage of tension. Air conditioning too loud, cheap coffee too bitter. 6 people sat at the long oak table, each with laptops open, pens poised, expressions carved from stone. When Zayden entered, no one stood. No one offered water. No one smiled. At the head sat Miriam Pike, lead counsel for internal compliance, a woman who had mastered the art of seeming fair while never actually taking a side. Mr. Cole, she said, not looking up from her notes. We were not expecting you. Zayden closed the door behind him. That's the problem, isn't it? Her eyes lifted, green, sharp, and trained not to blink too often. You're not listed as a whistleblower, nor is there a formal complaint attached to your name. Zayden stepped forward. I'm not here to complain. I'm here to correct the record. A man to her left, pale suit, horn-rimmed glasses, too tan for someone who worked indoors, spoke up. We understand there was a misunderstanding at the courthouse this morning. Zayden's laugh came out without permission. A misunderstanding? Pike leaned back slightly. You'll have a chance to clarify. I was assaulted in front of the building I helped design, handcuffed, accused of impersonation, threatened, and every officer involved is still on duty. Pike tilted her head. Have you submitted a formal incident report? No, Zayden said. But someone else did. He reached into his coat and pulled out a USB drive. Footage, 5 angles, 3 body cams, external courthouse cameras, and a civilian recording from a clerk named Jasmine Ivy. She emailed it to me before noon. The man in the pale suit reached for the drive. Zayden didn't hand it over. Not until I'm on record. Pike nodded once. Proceed. Zayden sat down at the empty chair across from her. The wood was cold against his back, the room colder still. He spoke evenly, without pause. He told them about the sidewalk, the slap, the words that followed. You don't belong here. He told them how no one had asked for his name, how his ID was never read, how the documents he carried were dismissed as fraudulent without a glance. I built the surveillance grid they'll use to review this footage, he added. Every angle, every blind spot, every timestamp. The irony is not lost on me. Silence settled into the corners of the room. Pike tapped her pen. What do you want from this board, Mr. Cole? Zayden stared at her. Truth. That's not a deliverable, the man in the pale suit murmured. I want an internal review of every use of force incident filed at the Jefferson Courthouse in the last 24 months. I want independent auditors to oversee the security division, and I want officers Murphy, Tanaka, and Delacroix suspended pending investigation. You're not law enforcement, Pike reminded him. No, he said. I'm a man whose career was almost erased because your officers couldn't imagine a black architect walking into a courtroom carrying case files with clearance. Pike folded her hands. We'll need time to review the footage. You have until 5 p.m. today, Zayden said. After that, I release it to the press. That changed the room. Not with shouting, but with a flicker behind their eyes. The kind of flicker reserved for when systems start to realize they're losing control. Pike straightened. That could compromise any active investigation. That's not my concern anymore. She looked at him for a long time. We'll need the drive. Zayden placed it on the table. Check the metadata, he said, standing. The timestamps are intact, unlike your reputation. As he turned to leave, someone finally spoke, quiet, hesitant, almost human. You really designed Courtroom D? Zayden paused. I designed the ceilings to catch sound without echo. I designed the door hinges so they wouldn't creak when victims walked in late. I designed the lighting so every face, guilty or innocent, could be seen clearly. He didn't wait for a response. The door clicked softly behind him. Outside, the wind had picked up. The air had that cracked dryness just before a storm, when clouds hover heavy but refuse to fall. He walked without direction, past rows of indifferent windows, past a line of school children holding hands and touring justice like a museum. When he reached the edge of the Civic Center Plaza, he stopped. There, across the street, was the sculpture garden. 7 abstract columns carved from local stone. It had been part of a civic pride initiative years ago. Zayden had helped design the lighting there too. Most people never noticed it. But at certain angles, if you walked past after sunset, the shadows spelled out a phrase etched in the foundation. Every voice deserves to echo. He stood in front of it now, feeling the bruise throb along his cheekbone. His fingers brushed the edge of the nearest column, tracing the chisel marks like braille. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from Jasmine Ivy. I've got more footage, and others are speaking up. You're not alone. He didn't reply right away, not because he was unsure, but because he knew what came next would not be quiet, not careful, not designed for comfort. This part wouldn't be drawn on paper. It would be built in public. The city moved around him like nothing had happened. Lunch crowds spilled from courthouses and state buildings, neckties loosened, ID badges swinging against collared shirts. Conversations rose and fell around Zayden in fragments, parking, bail requests, baseball scores. The system, unbothered, marched on. He walked 4 blocks to a cafe tucked behind the old transit station. Concrete floors, exposed brick, no music. The kind of place where people whispered, and every seat had a view of the door. Jasmine was already there, back to the wall, phone in hand, a second coffee untouched across from her. "You look like hell," she said when he sat. Zayden didn't answer. "Footage is clean," she added, sliding him a drive. "You were right. 4 angles. The audio's even clearer on this one. You can hear Tanaka laughing when Murphy slaps you." He nodded. "2 other clerks came to me," Jasmine continued. "One of them saw what happened from the second-floor window, said it wasn't the first time someone's been handled like that at the east entrance." Zayden stirred his coffee. It tasted like burnt soil and iron. "People are scared," Jasmine said quietly. "Good," Zayden replied. Jasmine looked at him for a long moment. "That's not the man I met last year. The one who wanted the light in courtroom C to feel gentler during custody trials." "That man got cuffed outside his own project," Zayden said. "He bled on his own blueprints." Jasmine leaned in, voice lowering. "What do you want, Zayden?" He didn't speak right away. Outside the window, a sheriff's cruiser rolled past, slow and indifferent. 2 officers inside. No eye contact. "I want a hearing," he said at last. "Public. On record. In front of media and peers. I want to put this entire building under scrutiny. Not just what happened to me. All of it." "That's not easy," she said. "It's not supposed to be." She hesitated. "You have allies. Quiet ones. Some of us have been waiting for something like this." "I'm not leading a parade," he muttered. "I'm tearing up the road." Jasmine smiled, but there was nothing amused in her eyes. "Then let me show you where to start." She reached into her bag and pulled out a black folder, thick and worn. She laid it on the table. A sticky note on the front read, "Eyes only," in her handwriting. "What is it?" "Complaints," she said. "Internal memos. Whistleblower drafts that were buried. I started collecting them after Tanaka shoved a public defender down the stairs and claimed she slipped." Zayden opened the folder. Names, case numbers, patterns, most of it hand-copied, with timestamps and building schematics. He paused at one photo, blurred security footage of a man pinned to the wall outside the west stairwell, face bloodied, hands raised. "That was a janitor," Jasmine said. "Wrong badge, wrong skin." Zayden turned another page. "The system isn't broken," Jasmine said softly. "It's doing exactly what it was built to do." Zayden closed the folder. His fingers lingered on the cover. "Then we build something else," he said. They left the cafe without a plan, just shared breath and conviction. Jasmine handed him a second copy of the footage on her way to the curb. "Be careful," she warned. "The moment you speak, you'll stop being a designer. You'll become a disruption." Zayden looked up at the courthouse dome glinting in the sun. "Then let's disrupt something." He walked toward the Civic Media Center across from City Hall. The building was low, slate gray, unremarkable. But every local outlet used the press room inside for official announcements and briefings. He stepped through the front doors and told the receptionist he wanted to schedule a press conference. "Subject?" she asked. He stared at the tiled floor beneath his feet, gray veined with gold. "Misconduct, patterned abuse, institutional blindness." She raised an eyebrow. "You a lawyer?" "No." "Activist?" "No." "Then what are you?" He looked her in the eye. "I'm a man who's done being quiet." An hour later, the first notices went out. Press advisory. Public remarks scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow. Location, Civic Press Room. 3. Speaker, Zayden Cole, District Judicial Architect. He knew some wouldn't show. Others would come just to dismiss him. But the cameras would be there. The sound would be clear. The room would hear him. He returned home just past sunset. His apartment sat 5 floors above an auto shop on the south side. The walls smelled of oil and pine cleaner. His neighbor's TV was always too loud. He didn't mind. Zayden stood in the mirror, unbuttoning his shirt slowly. The bruise on his cheek was worse now, swollen deep, purpling down toward the neck. His eye was nearly shut. He traced the edge of it with 2 fingers. Then he turned away. He spent the next 3 hours organizing files, laying out the evidence, sorting statements, rewatching footage until it no longer made him flinch. Just before midnight, he picked up a pen and opened a fresh notebook. He wrote 1 line at the top of the page. Every echo begins with silence. Then he wrote the speech. Not for vengeance, not for pity, but for clarity, for exposure, for reckoning. When he finished, he closed the notebook and placed it beside his ID badge. Then he turned off the lights and let the dark settle. He would not sleep. But in the silence, the storm gathered. The air inside the press room was colder than it needed to be. Industrial ventilation hummed above the ceiling tiles, steady and impersonal. The chairs were lined in uneven rows, metal legs screeching against linoleum as journalists claimed their territory. Zayden arrived 5 minutes early. He wore a dark charcoal jacket, collar sharp, eyes sharper. The bruise on his cheek had settled into something undeniable. It stretched toward his temple now, no longer angry red, but deep purple like a reminder written under the skin. His voice had not been heard yet, but his face had already spoken. A junior reporter from a local affiliate muttered, "That's him," to no one in particular. Someone else pulled out their phone and began recording before a single word was spoken. The podium was a cheap rental, scratched near the base, with a single mic and a fraying county flag hanging limp in the background. Behind it, a beige wall. No seal, no shield, just space. Zayden stepped to the front and placed a black folder beside the mic. He did not clear his throat. He did not shuffle papers. He looked up. They quieted faster than expected. "My name," he said slowly, "is Zayden Cole. You may have read it. You may have skimmed it. You may have mispronounced it in a hallway or whispered it in a courtroom. But after today, you won't forget it." No one moved. "I am not a politician. I am not an activist. I am not anyone you expected to see here. I design courthouses. I've spent 16 years shaping spaces for justice to live inside. Soundproof panels, accessible jury boxes, safe corridors for victims. That's my work." He let the silence breathe. "And 3 days ago, I was thrown against a granite wall, handcuffed, humiliated, and accused of pretending to be part of the very institution I helped build." He opened the folder and pulled out a still image from a security feed. His body, mid-impact, hitting the courthouse exterior. One arm raised instinctively, one officer behind him, 2 more watching. "I was carrying sealed documents. I was wearing identification. I was scheduled to meet with Judge Merrick on infrastructure improvements. None of that mattered." His hand hovered over the image before setting it aside. "Because when I approached the courthouse steps, they didn't see an architect. They didn't see a district staff member. They didn't see a public servant." He looked around the room, gaze level. They saw a black man standing where they thought he shouldn't be. No one interrupted. "And that," he said, "is the system working exactly as designed." He tapped the podium once, a soft knock that echoed slightly through the stillness. "I have no illusions. I know how stories like mine usually end. With a statement, with a shrug, with silence. But not this time." He leaned forward, voice lower now. "Because this time, I brought receipts." He gestured behind him. A projector blinked to life. Footage filled the beige wall. The entire arrest played out in front of them, muted but undeniable. The slap, the search, the refusal to read the badge clipped at his hip. The words, "You don't belong here." Someone in the second row cursed under their breath. The video ended. Zayden waited. "This is not new," he said. "Not for me, not for people who look like me. But what is new is that I'm still standing. I'm still credentialed, and I'm still holding the keys to the doors they tried to lock me out of." A woman near the back raised her hand, but he didn't call on her yet. "I've submitted formal complaints. I've filed preservation orders on all courthouse footage from that morning. I've initiated an internal investigation into patterns of racially motivated misconduct on public grounds." He paused, then added, "And I am requesting the public release of every dismissed complaint filed at Jefferson Courthouse since 2018. That got their attention. The woman's hand remained raised. He nodded to her. "Angela Hurst, Channel 9. Do you plan to sue the department?" Zayden's eyes didn't waver. "Do you think I need to?" Murmurs spread. He pointed to the image still frozen behind him. "This is not about money. This is about memory. This is about the accumulation of injuries that are never believed until they're played on a screen. This is about what happens when we assume justice is a place instead of a principle." Another hand. A man in a navy blazer. Why now? Why speak up? Zayden stared at him for a long beat. "Because silence was comfortable. And I don't want comfort anymore." He closed the folder gently. "I've walked the hallways of justice in quiet long enough. I've watched good people with credentials in their pocket and dignity in their spine get reduced to suspects in seconds." He looked straight into the camera lens now. "If it can happen to me, it has already happened to someone else. And I will not let that cycle keep turning." He stepped back from the podium. That was it. No slogans, no applause lines, just fact. As he turned to leave, someone stood in the back. A woman with graying hair and a courthouse lanyard. Her voice cracked just enough to be human. "Mr. Cole," she said, "what should we do now?" Zayden paused, one hand on the exit handle. "Watch everything," he said without turning. "Then remember who built the rooms you're standing in." And then he was gone. Outside, the sky was gray with the promise of rain. The streets felt tighter, heavier, like the city itself had heard what he said and needed time to absorb it. He didn't rush, didn't speak. But with every step, something in the world felt a little less silent. The storm finally broke the next morning. It didn't come with thunder or sheets of rain, but in whispers and panicked phone calls behind closed office doors. The footage had spread. Not viral, not yet, but fast enough. Legal forums, journalist Slack channels, a few influential accounts on social media that used the phrase structural injustice with more intention than irony. Zayden arrived at the courthouse with no escort, no statement, and no expression. He passed through security without a word. The same checkpoint where they had stripped him of his name 3 mornings ago now opened like a gate too embarrassed to creak. Ramos was on duty again. She met his eyes and nodded once. Nothing more. The hallway to Courtroom D felt longer than usual. Not in steps, but in memory. It was the same hallway where he had first been stopped. Same floor tiles. Same dull overhead lighting. But now the stairs were different. Not aggressive, not mocking, just silent. Like everyone had seen a ghost and couldn't quite remember where they'd buried the body. At the far end of the corridor, Chief Judge Lucinda Mayweather waited by his old drafting table. She wore a long gray coat over her robe and held a manila folder in both hands like a verdict she hadn't agreed to sign. "You caused quite the stir," she said when he approached. Zayden didn't slow. "Justice usually does. You embarrassed this court." "No," he said. "I exposed it." Her eyes narrowed. She was not used to being spoken to like that, especially not by someone she used to sign paychecks for. He stopped 2 feet in front of her. "You read the report?" he asked. "I read the transcripts. I saw the footage." "Then you know it wasn't an accident." "I know it was systemic." Zayden tilted his head. And what do you intend to do about it? She exhaled slowly, like a woman trying not to admit that her house was on fire because she designed the chimney herself. We're placing Officers Murphy and Tanaka on administrative leave pending full investigation, she said. Internal Affairs is reviewing access footage and body cam inconsistencies, and we've reached out to third-party mediators to oversee racial bias assessments for all court-adjacent officers. Zayden's expression didn't shift. That's not enough. She blinked. People saw what happened to me because it was filmed, he said. But what about the people who never made it to a podium? Who were bruised in holding rooms and silenced inside stairwells? What happens to them? She didn't answer. He pointed to the manila folder. Is that about me? It's a draft, she said. A formal apology from the State Judiciary Office. If you sign it, we can begin talks about restitution, about reputation recovery. I don't want recovery, Zayden said. I want excavation. I want the truth dug out and named, not patched over with letters and legalese. He took the folder anyway. Not to read, but to carry. Let it weigh something. Let them know he didn't leave it behind. I'm not going away, he said. She didn't stop him as he walked into Courtroom D. The room was empty except for one man standing near the gallery seats. Tall, black, late 40s, suit jacket too tight around the shoulders, like he had grown out of formal spaces but still wore them out of necessity. He turned slowly. You Zayden? The man asked. Zayden nodded. Name's Roy Bennett, DOJ Civil Rights Division. You came fast. Roy smiled without humor. Justice usually moves slow until it gets embarrassed. They sat in the jury box, the one Zayden had spent weeks redesigning so disabled jurors could finally enter and exit with dignity. Roy pulled out a tablet. We've reviewed the footage. Not just yours. Others. Jasmine Ivy gave us everything she had. We verified it all. Zayden watched the dust drift in a beam of light near the court seal. His court. His design. We're launching a federal probe into Jefferson County law enforcement procedures, Roy continued. Grand jury will convene in 2 weeks. Zayden nodded slowly. You'll need to testify. Publicly. Under oath. I already have, he said. Just not in a courtroom. Roy closed the tablet. We're also reviewing the last 5 years of use of force cases in municipal spaces. Your name keeps showing up. Not in complaints, in plans, in contracts, in design revisions. I built most of this wing, Zayden said. Roy looked around. Then maybe now it can finally be used the way you intended. They shook hands before Roy left. Firm grip, honest weight. Not symbolic, not performative. Just two men who understood how systems eat silence and how truth tastes bitter the first time it's spoken. Zayden remained in the courtroom after Roy left. He walked the perimeter, touched the backs of chairs, measured steps from the bench to the gallery, reached out and pressed one finger to the glass wall of the soundproof victim chamber. He had designed it to muffle trauma, not conceal it. Now he wasn't sure it had done either. A janitor entered quietly with a mop and bucket. Young, Latino, head down. Zayden stepped aside. The janitor paused, then looked up. I saw the video, he said. Thanks. Zayden just nodded. He walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside, clouds rolled above the skyline like ink spreading across paper. The streets pulsed with motion again. Horns, footsteps, breath. But something in the air had shifted. Not just for him. For everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong on the steps of a building they helped build. The voicemail came at 3:12 a.m. Zayden had been sitting on the floor of his apartment, surrounded by open files, case notes, and architectural renderings. The city outside was still, every window dark except his. The voice on the message was low, female, tired in a way that sounded practiced. This is Valerie Kinsey, Executive Liaison from the Office of State Judicial Affairs. We'd like to discuss your appearance before the federal inquiry and potential options regarding your continued employment. Please call before noon." He didn't. By mid-morning, 3 news outlets had run extended clips of his press conference. Someone had layered it with orchestral music and posted it under the title, "The Man Who Built the Room and Got Locked Out." It had 200,000 views in 6 hours. Someone else turned it into a TikTok montage, split-screened against historical footage of civil rights marches and courthouse steps from another century. Zayden didn't share any of it. He took the long way to the courthouse that morning, past the church with the broken steeple, past the mural of the little girl holding a protest sign that read, "Let me breathe and build," past the donut shop where a white officer once refused to serve him because he was wearing a hoodie after hours. He stopped just outside the west stairwell entrance, the same place where Jasmine's photo showed a janitor pressed to the wall. He stood there for a full minute, imagining the angle, the approach, the moment before the impact. When he entered the lobby, Judge Merrick was waiting. He wasn't in robes, just slacks and a navy sweater, sleeves rolled, a man trying to appear casual inside the House of Law. His expression was somewhere between apology and calculation. "We need to talk," he said. Zayden didn't stop walking. "Now you want to listen." Merrick followed. "You're making things worse." "For who?" "For everyone who still has to work here." Zayden turned sharply. "You think silence protects people? You think pretending not to see makes anyone safer? Because it didn't protect me. And it didn't protect the man in that photograph either." Merrick lowered his voice. "You've made your point." "No," Zayden said. "I've made your legacy visible." They stared at each other in the corridor. 2 men. 2 versions of law. One designed to hold power. One designed to hold people. Merrick looked away first. "You've got a choice now," he said. "You can either become the story or help rewrite it." Zayden didn't respond. His silence said enough. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, counted each step like a breath. On the 3rd floor, reporters were already lining the hall outside Hearing Room C. The Department of Justice had called for a special review of procedural failures within state security contracts. Zayden's name was on the docket. Inside, the room was colder than it should have been. The windows had been blacked out with temporary panels. A projector hummed in the background. No one spoke above a whisper. Zayden sat alone at the table near the front. No counsel, no prepared statement. Just the folder of notes Jasmine had helped him compile and the printed floor plan of the courthouse's north entrance. Across from him, federal counsel arranged their papers. One woman adjusted her glasses 3 times before she finally looked up and nodded. That was the cue. The lead examiner began. "Mr. Cole, do you swear to tell the truth?" Zayden raised his hand. "I do." "State your role for the record." "I am the Senior Architectural Consultant for Jefferson County Judiciary and Municipal Infrastructure Division. I oversee design, safety, and procedural functionality for court facilities across 5 districts." "And your presence here today?" "I was arrested, unprovoked, on courthouse grounds while performing my duties. That incident has triggered a broader examination of how race, power, and silence intersect within our legal buildings." The room grew still. The examiner clicked a remote. Images appeared behind him. Zayden, mid-arrest, the bruise, the body language of 3 armed officers facing 1 man with documents. "You were not resisting?" "No." "Did you identify yourself?" They didn't ask. "Did they search your credentials?" They assumed they were fake. "And your badge?" "Was visible." The examiner paused. "Mr. Cole, what do you want this committee to understand?" Zayden exhaled. "That buildings are not neutral. That architecture reflects belief. And when we design spaces for justice but staff them with prejudice, we create contradiction. This courthouse was meant to represent fairness, but it allowed abuse to happen under its own inscription. He looked around the room. This is not just about me. This is about every person whose dignity was compromised in a building meant to defend it. The woman with the glasses cleared her throat. And your recommendation? Zayden placed the floor plan on the table. Redesign not just the entrances, but the culture that controls them. Embed bias accountability in every access point. Mandate training for security based on spatial equity and not threat response. And create public-facing review boards that can investigate complaints without waiting for someone to be famous or bruised. The room was silent. The examiner leaned forward. And if the court declines these recommendations? Zayden closed the folder. Then it proves the system only listens when forced to, and I'll make sure it stays forced. The hearing adjourned 30 minutes later. Outside, cameras waited. Zayden didn't stop to speak. He walked past the questions, the microphones, the flashes of light. He walked into the wind like it owed him something. And for the first time since he was thrown against that wall, he felt like it might finally give it back. The mural went up 2 weeks after the hearing. It covered the west wall of the courthouse parking structure, 4 stories high, stretching from the cracked sidewalk to the faded rooftop ledge. At the center stood a silhouette of a man, not specific, not portraited, but unmistakably black, unmistakably tall, unmistakably standing. Around him bloomed blueprints, not of buildings, but of bodies, raised hands, bent knees, scarred backs, uplifted chins. Someone had painted the words, "No entry without dignity," in bold white brushstrokes across the base. Zayden never asked who commissioned it. He didn't need to. He passed by it on his walk to the new construction site every morning, said nothing. Just nodded once, like greeting a truth long overdue. He'd taken a leave of absence from the county, turned down the settlement, turned down the title promotion, said no to the public apology letter they wanted him to co-sign. Instead, he took a call from a non-profit in Detroit building restorative justice centers and offered to help them design something different. They called it the Equitable Room. No judge's bench, no armed guard at the entrance, no tiered rows separating witness from observer, just a circular space filled with light where people could face each other without barriers between pain and truth. That was where he put his name. He stayed in the city, though. Rented a studio above a barber shop in a quieter part of town. Woke early, walked long, slept little. Jasmine visited once a week, brought takeout and updates, told him the oversight board had expanded its review statewide, said the new training protocols had been implemented at 3 more courthouses, told him one of the officers who lied on the stand had been indicted for perjury. Another had resigned quietly and disappeared from public record. Zayden didn't ask about Merrick. He didn't ask about Mayweather. He didn't need to. Some things are louder when left unnamed. One afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. Inside was a photograph. It showed Zayden, captured mid-speech during the press conference. Behind him, the courthouse seal. But someone had drawn a red circle around the part of the wall where his shadow fell. In the shape of it, you could see the outline of a fist. Just barely. Just enough. On the back of the photo, 5 words. "We see you. Keep going." He placed the photo in the drawer beside the rest. Not to hide it, just to remember it existed. Weeks passed. One morning, he stood outside the site of a demolished juvenile detention center the city had voted to tear down. Now it was nothing but chain-link fencing, scattered bricks, and dust. A city planner handed him a tablet. "So," she said, "what do we build here?" Zayden stared at the empty space for a long time. He imagined its shape under snow, under heat, under moonlight. Imagined what it could become if no one had to fear its hallways. He handed the tablet back. "Something that does not forget," he said. Later that evening, he sat on the roof of his building, knees pulled up, jacket wrapped tight against the cold. The skyline flickered below him, lights blinking like nervous eyes. He remembered being 9 years old, walking into a courtroom with his aunt who was fighting an eviction notice. Remembered the way she squeezed his hand when the bailiff told them to move to the back. Remembered the way the judge never once looked them in the eye. That was the first room he ever knew to be unjust. That was the first room he ever wanted to redesign. Now he had. Not just with steel and glass, but with noise, with refusal, with presence. He closed his eyes and listened. No sirens, no metal doors, no voices raised in fear or warning, just the sound of wind moving through scaffolding, like breath, like the city itself was exhaling. The next morning, a mother and her son stopped in front of the mural. The boy asked who the man in the center was. She crouched down, adjusted his collar, and answered simply, "That's someone who built things they tried to tear down." The boy nodded, then pointed upward. "Is he still building?" She looked across the street. Zayden stood on the other side of the plaza, clipboard in hand, head bowed slightly as he checked measurements near a concrete slab marked with fresh chalk lines. She smiled. He never stopped.